I like to tell people Jesus is my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that in any way to diminish his importance, but in our relationship, I'm getting stirred up here.
Yeah.
In our relationship, he's the only one that ever tells me the truth.
Yeah.
My wife likes to think she's the truth teller, but sometimes it's her own agenda. You know, it's like, I mean, and sometimes she doesn't have the bigger picture. But my wife is a really good friend, and I love her. And I appreciate the fact that she's trying to keep me on the straight and narrow, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the real truth teller, and grounded in our friendship, I can persevere through anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I have a physical problems, you know, I take it to him. If I have an emotional problem, I take it to him. If I have worries, I take it to him. I dump everything on him, and it's okay because he says, "Come to me, all ye who are weary and heavy burdened, you know, and I'll give you rest." I mean, he says, I put it in the vernacular: "Give me your junk, hand it all over to me." When my father was dying, I gave my dad, and I mean, he was literally in the process of dying, and I gave my dad to Jesus, and I went from great despair about my dad. It was really complicated, but it was just really despairing. He had Alzheimer's, and it was ugly and terrible. I literally, in my imagination, handed my father over to Jesus, and Jesus took him. And when he took him, I was filled with such peace and such joy. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable that, and some people inappropriately said, "Well, is your dad in heaven or in hell?" And I said, I don't know. I don't care. He's in Jesus's hands. Yeah. Whatever my dad needs is the exact right thing for him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't have to second guess, like, oh, maybe Jesus isn't bright enough to figure this out or kind enough to figure this out. You know, Jesus totally gets it. He knows my father from before he was born, and the messed up household with the alcoholic father he was raised. He knows all that stuff. He knows all the things, all his insecurities and anxieties that caused him to do stupid things. And he knows all the goodness that he tried to do. And, you know, he knows it all. I mean, like, I couldn't give my dad over to a better individual in the whole universe.
Yeah.
And
that's beautiful.
So I can certainly give Jesus my cares and anxieties and hopes and fears.
Right. You know, and I love that whole concept of, like, Jesus died on the cross to take all of our guilt, all our shame, all our regrets, all our sin, to make all that his own, you know? And so Jesus is like, I want my stuff back, please. If you're carrying that around, I want my stuff back.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why he's like, cast all your cares on the Lord. Every single burden. He wants his children completely carefree in the care of God.
Yeah.
And so that's what leaning on God, befriending God. You know, this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, because whenever I see in scripture about God being our friend, that just really resonated with me. It was like, okay, that is a level that that really spoke to me. You know, there's other terms that God uses to describe our relationship with him, like father to son, and even a husband to a bride, or a sheep to a shepherd, you know, all these terms. But like, to be his friend, like, wow.
I think that when the Bible said he knew us before we were born, in the Bible, knowing someone means more than you know their name and address and occupation, you know? It means you really know them. And so if God says, I knew you before you were born, it means a depth of knowing. What we were, whether we were just a little beam of light, or whether we were a being, a spiritual being, I don't know. And I don't believe in in double predestination. I think that God knows everything, but God also gives us free will. And I think there's a real tension between God wanting and hoping and planning for the best of us and us making our choices. The way I see life is that in every moment we make choices, and we have really good choices, godly choices, and we have really bad choices, anti-God choices, and then a variety of things in between. And what God is intending for us to do with this life, what God's will is for our life, is to actually think with our heart and with our mind about trying to make the best choices at every minute. And let me just illustrate this real simply. My wife is a pediatric occupational therapist. She works with little disabled children. She's been doing it for almost 40 years now. Mm-hmm. And the life expectancy in her work is 6 years because of tremendous burnout. Mm-hmm. So she does a visit, and they're heroin addicts. The parents are heroin addicts. And the parents are so stoned, they don't know who she is or why she's there or what they're doing.
Yeah.
And she comes home and she's very, very upset. Yeah. And she's not in a happy, pretty mood. What's my job? My job is to love her and listen to her and to be kind and not tell her what to do and not try and cheer her up or anything. It's just to be, as present and as sympathetic and as kind as possible. Maybe I didn't have the best day in the world, or maybe there's something I want to talk about that's has nothing to do with her work. Maybe what I think is much more important. Yeah. Those are the kind of choices we make every day of our life.
The choices for love.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's what I love about, I highlighted that in our last talk. Jesus' words to you when you met him in your near-death experience, where he says, our plan is for you to love the person that you're with.
Right.
As you go through your life, just love whoever you're with. That's all, that's the best thing, right? That's amazing. And so for that example, it's perfect example of okay, you loving her, others-centered, self-giving love. Honestly, that was my favorite chapter in this book was the chapter on love. And I would love to just go to that chapter. My favorite quote of probably the whole book was, we were made by love to be an expression of God's love. Mm-hmm. And that was just beautiful. For the longest time now, over 10 years, the Lord just highlighted some scriptures to me that totally brought a paradigm shift for me. And I hope it does so for our listeners too, that God is love, in whom we live and move and have our being. Yeah. Those are two scriptures that just got paired in my mind, and it just reshaped my reality. Oh my goodness, okay, we are in God. There's nowhere you can go that God isn't. He fills and floods the whole universe. There's nowhere, he takes up all the space, and he is love. Well, we're swimming in an ocean of love right now. You talk about that in your book too. To know the love of Christ is to become aware of the oceans of love that lie before us. Wow. Yeah. That we can just learn to receive. And Christian maturity is all about how well are you receiving that love? Mm-hmm. How well are you letting God love you? Mm-hmm. And that in turn changes everything, because we love because he first loved us. So it's about getting that receiving love down first. Just soak in his love. Just don't try to please him or do anything to earn anything. No, just receive his love, and then that will change everything.
And it's a different kind of love than what some people think of as love. Some people think of love as possession, domination, control. And in our lives, sometimes we're put in positions where we do have to control behavior. Like if we have children, you don't let them run in the street. You don't let them go out of the house in the middle of the night. I mean, you don't let them play with the stove. I mean, you're trying to teach them how to operate in this universe in a safe and reasonable way. But so being a parent can be loving when you have to discipline a child in an appropriate way. But love is not, I've got to have that. I want to possess it. I want to take it over. When we have a better world, which I know is coming,
yes,
people will be able to be more open about their love for one another without it either being misunderstood or being used to misrepresent, because, like, you know, all guys know that they've used the word love because they're lust, you know, and they don't really care about that person at all. They're just like overwhelmed with lust and say, "Oh, I love you," or whatever, you know, anything to, you know.
Yeah, and actually, I love that's how you started out your chapter on love, talking about the culture. You said, growing up, my generation was greatly influenced by popular music of the day. The music industry catered to the frenzy of sexual impulses in the teenage population that bought the records. Love was a major theme of most of the music. Intentionally, the understanding of love in the rock and roll was sexual. Our hormones were out of control, and the lyrics of sexual innuendo were easily understood. The emphasis on the strong beat aroused our passions. Dancing was foreplay. We equated love completely with sex. And this is not at all what Jesus was referring to in his numerous teachings on the importance of love. Sexuality is a separate issue from love.
Yeah.
What did Jesus want to know us about God's love? And then you go into it. First of all, defining love appropriately in the pure way that Jesus brings it to us, right? But then also your next chapter going into forgiveness, you know, and how important forgiveness is, and how do you move on? How do you heal from those wounds? And of course, it's by soaking in God's love. I just want to read this, what you wrote here in the love chapter here. God is not withholding his love from us. Rather, in our growth and acceptance of the Spirit of Christ, we are increasing in our ability to accept the love of God. It's all about receiving and opening our heart more of the love of God. It's good.
There's a little parable that Jesus teaches about the Good Shepherd. And the Good Shepherd in the Old Testament and in the New Testament is always the Messiah. You know, in Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. Psalm 23 is about Jesus. It's about the Messiah. And Jesus tells the Good Shepherd will leave the 99 sheep and go after the one that's gone astray. And when he brings them back, there's great rejoicing. And even in heaven, there's great rejoicing. I get so many people, particularly in the emails, who say, you know, I've gone away from God. I've turned away from Jesus. I've turned away from the church. I don't think he'll ever take me back. My sins are great. And I'm like, no, wrong. You've got it so wrong. When you turn back, the party in heaven would amaze you.
Yes.
It would just amaze you. And if you go to a church where they tell you you're not worthy to walk in that door, get away from that church and go someplace where they're happy for you, because they just don't understand the Bible, the Scriptures, God. They don't get it at all.
Yeah,
that's one of the things that really frustrates me about the church. Is I worked in a mission church in a very bad part of Cincinnati, and we actually had some prostitutes and gangbangers and stuff like that come to church. And we tried to be very extravagant in our welcome of those people. Yeah. Unfortunately, most churches are, I mean, all churches think they're friendly, all churches think they're welcoming, but you can go to churches where people just sort of look at you like, who are you? What are you doing here? You're not one of us.
That's
Do
weird.
you belong here? Like, this is such a sad example. My mom was a believer, and she was raised in a Scandinavian family as a Lutheran, very, very strict. No, couldn't read the newspaper on Sunday, weren't allowed to go to movies or dance, and blah blah blah. Real strict Lutherans. And a neighbor, when my mom was very old and pretty disabled, invited her to go to a Lutheran church. And my mother hadn't been to a Lutheran. She was going to the Congregational Church, and they invited her to go to Lutheran church. And so it was Missouri Synod Lutheran. And the pastor said before they served communion, if you're not Missouri Synod Lutheran, you are not welcome to take communion.
Yeah.
And my mother got angry.
Yeah.
And I mean, she didn't say or do anything, but she when I talked to her on the phone, she was really angry.
Yeah.
And she said, who are they to tell me that I'm not a good enough Lutheran?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have an exciting opportunity. A pastor from Nairobi, Kenya, came and visited me a little while ago, and his purpose was to invite me to come to Kenya to preach. And Christianity is exploding in the southern hemisphere of the world, Asia, Latin America, and Africa.
That's great.
And he was, I mean, it's a total chaotic explosion of Christianity over there, and he wants me to come over there for a few weeks and preach. And so I'm going to go and
oh, great.
Less than a year from now, and I'm so excited about it because he's telling me about the enthusiasm for Christianity. He said that if you stand on a street corner and start preaching, a crowd will gather and listen to you for as long as you preach. And he said, I think in America, if I did that, I might get arrested. And I said, yeah, actually, you probably would for disturbing the peace, for blocking traffic, whatever, There is in the world a hunger for God. There is in the world a hunger for knowing Jesus Christ. And there's places in the world where it's illegal. There's like, for example, in a lot of Muslim countries and things like that. I did a month thing in China, and we had to be really careful about, not offending the authorities and stuff like that. But in Europe and the United States, Christianity has become a oppressed minority, and the oppression is materialism and indifference. In other words, by materialism is that Christians are out of their minds, they're crazy, they're delusional, that the only truth is scientific truth, and the Bible is all fantasy, it's all made up, it's all like some kind of like weird conspiracy that people invented.
I wish people would actually do their research about the Bible and to know what that we have a preserved, like a reconstructed original. Like when it was first penned, copies were made and sent out and dispersed, thus guaranteeing the reliability of the original. And then just the inspiration and the flawlessness behind the Word of God and the testimony that it bears witness.
Any Christian who has any kind of theological training knows that God is beyond our comprehension. We just have these revelations that God has given us so that we can have a relationship with God. But we can never fully grasp God, except that when God said, they don't get it, they just aren't getting me at all. as I try and reveal myself to them, they misunderstand me. So I know what I'll do. I'll just come to them as a person and I'll show them.
Yeah.
And there was this little 3-year, the ministry 3 years or a 30 odd year event in a nowhere place in a backwater of the Roman Empire. Israel was not like the hot, wonderful spot where a Roman soldier wanted to be sent, and nobody ever wanted to be Roman governor there, because it was just like, it was off on the edge of the empire, and it was like, amongst these crazy Jewish people who were always, fighting to maintain their own identity and faith. And and in the midst of that, in the poorest possible circumstances, born in a stable, who immediately became a political refugee, trying to escape the infanticide of Herod the Great and escaping to Egypt, and then coming back. And what Jesus actually did for a living, he was a construction worker. We always depict him in this nice little carpentry shop with all of his planes and saws and vices and clamps and things all hanging on the wall. Wrong. No, he didn't have all that stuff. What he and Joseph did was they did construction work, and a lot of the work was stone. There wasn't like a lot of wood. And his hands probably were extremely calloused. He probably had some pretty awesome upper body strength. Because what he did was physical and no formal education. And this God, you got to be kidding, God. You got to be kidding. Could you have picked a more humble circumstance? And then he becomes an itinerant preacher with a bunch of fishermen and and outcasts for his group, and then decides to culminate it with a crucifixion, which is such a terrible idea, such a horrible idea.
Which looked like defeat, Yeah,
and I think that the amazing thing about it is that the prince of this world, the evil one, thought, I've got it. It's over. Hi, kitty.
That's my cat.
God's plan is so ridiculous. I am going to annihilate the plan. Yeah. And this will all be mine, because I'm going to kill the plan. I am going to massacre it. And
I'm sure he thought that.
The evil one doing his happy dance at the crucifixion, with all the people jeering Jesus and mocking him and, and insulting him and probably throwing, mud at him and stuff like that. And evil was destroyed by itself.
Yeah.
Evil defeated evil.
Right.
I tell people when people ask me if they want to have a relationship with God, this is what I tell them to do. I say, find an empty church. Doesn't matter what kind of church. Just find it. Go on a weekday when there's nobody there, or maybe just the secretary. If the church is locked, go around to the office and ask the secretary if you can go into the church and pray. And they will. I would think they would always say yes. You can do that. Now, when I was young, churches weren't locked. Nowadays, they're all locked. But anyways, you can get in, sit in the sanctuary, look at the cross, and think about Jesus reaching out on that cross to you in love and saying, "It's all forgiven. I just want to love you." Think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that really stood out to me when I read your chapter on forgiveness, something that I've been, it says forgiveness is an act of healing. The broken is made whole, the injured is repaired. I actually wrote a note to myself, hey, read this, when you're on there. To forgive is to humble ourselves. That's amazing. Why is it so difficult to forgive? For us to forgive or even receive forgiveness, it requires humility. So to forgive is to humble ourselves. The forgiver and the forgiven have to put their pride aside. They have to put their anger aside. They have to respect each other. The desire to be in relationship with another person has to be stronger than the desire to prove that we are right and they are wrong. It is easier to be complacent with our sense of rightness than it is to do the painful work of reconciliation. Yeah. So that was good. That was good. One of the thoughts that I had was that Jesus doesn't just stop with forgiven. He makes us innocent again. That's what redemption's all about. It's not just, oh, you're forgiven, but you have to live with that lingering, oh, but I did that, and that lingering shame or whatever. No, he actually makes you innocent. You're holy and without blame before him in love. If you have worked this out with God and then you try to apologize for that thing again, he's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's forgiven and forgotten. Yeah, Howard, any last words? It's like,
Well, for those who are experiencing this, I hope that they are pleased and affirmed in what we've talked about.
mm-hmm.
For those that this may be new or challenging or weird or suspect, you don't have to believe Daniel. You don't have to believe me. Go to the source.
Yeah.
Go to Jesus, and it has to be with sincerity, but no cost, no dues required. Just go to him and say, I really want to know you. Don't demand that he do anything for you. He's not your puppet. Don't say, we'll make the ceiling cave in, or, I want to see an angel right now, or I won't play. That's not going to work. I promise you it won't work to demand anything of him. Say, I just want to know you, and I want to know you in my heart, and I want to know you in my mind, and any way that you want to, reveal yourself to me is good for me. Come on, Jesus, come now.
Yes, amen to that.
Yeah.
So thank you, Howard. That was beautiful, and I think we'll just leave it at that, and just leave that invitation open to people. So begin your relationship with God. Join the resistance. Join the light side. Let's rebel against the darkness.
Right.
So thank you, Howard, for spending this time here in this interview.
My pleasure.
I'm sure it'll go out and bless a lot of people.
Right.
And, thank you.
Okay.
Bless you.
Thanks.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.